Back to the show. And campaigning US investigative journalist and author of the best-selling Unmasked Inside Antifa's radical plan to destroy democracy, Andy Ngo, is today's outsider. Andy Ngo, so brilliant to have you on the show on a day where politics in your country has been turned on its head. So much to discuss. But what do you make first of why Joe Biden stood down in the way that he did yesterday? No television appearance, simply a letter, probably not written by him, tweeted or released on X, I guess we should say now.
So there's been a lot of statements from world leaders issuing kind statements to Biden after he announced that he wouldn't be running anymore as president. It's interesting. They're responding as if he had somehow stepped down from the presidency, although I think they're speaking to something that they do see, which is that Biden himself isn't really the one leading the United States of America. It's the DNC. And so he has never been particularly independently minded in his leadership skills. He's always deferred, I think, because of his age and his infirmity, that he's had to rely on the machine party to run everything. And for the most part, he was kept out of the close public eye of the public, and many of his aides and those around him didn't even know how much he had deteriorated until that public debate. So I think that without the support of the DNC behind him, that's the Democratic National Committee, he could no longer go forward. And he had made it clear for a month now, ever since the voices began trying to push him out, that he didn't want to leave, but he was forced out. I think this is an interesting contrast, because I think Trump, for all his character flaws, one thing you can never fault him on is somebody who is pushed around. In fact, ever since going back to 2015, Trump has always positioned himself in some ways in opposition to the RNC. And many, as we know, in the RNC establishment really hated him, wanted to force him out by any means necessary, poured in money to candidates like Jeb Bush at the time, who was the establishment pick. And Trump just continued to push forward. I don't think Biden had that fighting spirit inside him. He obviously didn't. He stepped down. I think the next question that I'm asking myself is, if President Biden is not in a state to run for president, then how can he be in a state to be the president?
Well, of course, he's not. He's not. And that's what's so despicable. There should be the 25th Amendment enacted, but we know it won't be, because they're not actually concerned about whether Biden can do the job or not. They want other people to do the job for him. They're concerned about whether he could beat Trump or not.
That's a big concern, and all the polling I'll remind for the viewers is that it's been catastrophic for the former Democrat candidate pick, Biden, in a way that's actually shocked the chattering classes, and that states in the US that were not in play are now in play, according to some of the most recent polling. We don't have any polling yet on how the VP, Kamala Harris, goes against Trump, but she's never been particularly popular. To remind everyone, she dropped out in 2020 before the primaries because she was polling so low.
She was a disaster. And the thing is, we know, Andy, why she was picked, because Biden said it. He said, I'm going to pick a black woman. So he boxed himself in. There were literally a couple of choices, Kamala Harris or Stacey Abrams, effectively. But you've been pretty critical of Kamala Harris in the past, specifically her rhetoric over Black Lives Matter in 2020, especially over Portland, of course, where Antifa was rife. So tell me, is she a dangerous force? And what did she do back in 2020 that was so disturbing to you?
So Kamala is criticized a lot for her bad oratory skills. I think that's a bit of a shallow criticism. My concerns with her is that in 2020, when the United States was in the middle of weeks of deadly, violent riots where people were killed, neighborhoods were torched, buildings were besieged. She put out a fundraiser to help raise legal support for those violent riot suspects who had been arrested in Minneapolis. Minneapolis is where George Floyd died and where some of the worst violence happened, some of the worst deadly political violence happened in America. In July of 2020, my home city of Portland, Oregon, the federal courthouse was besieged every night for an entire month in an actual insurrection against the federal government. And Democrats like Kamala Harris, like Nancy Pelosi, like the former Democrat governor of the state at the time, all put out public statements that they wanted the federal law enforcement that had been sent there by President Trump to protect the federal courthouse. They wanted them to go home. If the federal officers were not there, and I was there on the ground undercover, that building is a huge federal courthouse, and all of those within it would have been burnt down.
Really, really shocking, isn't it?
Yes, I mean,
and she
right now we're not experiencing.
That. She encouraged. She did nothing to push back on it.
She went on MSNBC and repeated the line that the officers needed to be sent home. And I think the strategy of the Democrats at that time was that they were willing to sacrifice a city like Portland to spite Trump. And with all their rhetoric now about calming some of the language because of the attempted assassination attempt just a week ago, when they actually had the opportunity to tamp down some of their own rhetoric in the midst of mass political violence 3.5 years ago, they not only did they choose not to, they chose to actually inflame and call for conditions that made things worse, and people died as a result.
Now, Andy, you speak about the attempted assassination of Trump, and of course, for many years now, you have become one of the foremost experts in political violence in the US. Of course, your best-selling book was all about Antifa. I know there's not much known at this point about Thomas Matthew Crooks, the man who very nearly shot Trump and did get taken out himself. What's your take on that? Because there were a lot of rumors in the early days that he could have had some involvement in Antifa. Have you seen anything to suggest that could be the case? And why do you think there seems to be so little original reporting on this young man, given his importance to this whole story?
So one of my known criticisms of the left and the activist left is whenever there's some type of, let's say, officer-involved shooting, all these false claims will come out about the circumstances of a particular shooting in the immediate hours and minutes after some video is released. And I would urge also, because this issue of jumping onto things on social media and sharing it without verifying it, the right also has that issue. And they did that in this particular case as well. There were false names and false pictures of people that were put out that were alleged to be the gunmen, and there were narratives around the people, the alleged gunmen being with Antifa, and that information was unverified at that time and was also untrue. So people really should not be sharing that type of information in the immediate moments after a mass shooting. Regarding this particular attempted would-be assassin, we'll have to wait to see what law enforcement finds out, if we ever do. What's been reported is that he did not leave a known social media presence. So often that is the main clues of one's political views or how they may have been radicalized. We don't have that information currently. And we possibly may never find out publicly. There have been mass killers in recent years in America where the motives have remained particularly unknown, like in Las Vegas a number of years ago. So I have not seen any evidence that this particular gunman was allied with the extreme far left as of this moment. So I'll reiterate that. I know that people want convenient narratives. For example, when the 6th of January riot happened, there was a claim from many on the right that it was Antifa who was rioting. And there were some of the far left agitators who have been prosecuted and convicted, a few of them. But there are some people who weren't identified, and we still don't know to this day. But that's not evidence to say that that's a far left conspiracy or anything. So I always urge people to go on the evidence that is known and to be very careful. However, I think even if we don't find out the motives for this would-be assassin, we should pay attention to the responses from many in the establishment left, the activist left, in response to the shooting of Trump and those and the Trump supporter who was killed and others who were critically injured. There was a lot of celebration that the attack happened and a lamentation that the gunman's aim wasn't better. That's particularly disturbing, and that shooting did happen in this context of years of this incitement to violence against candidate Trump.
Very good point. And, author of Unmasked, Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy. Such a pleasure to have you on Outspoken, Andy, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you.